Clara Whitlow stumbled from the stagecoach with one shoe split open, one cheek burning red from the driver's slap, and every face in Mercy Crossing turned to watch her shame. Her bridal ribbon hung loose around her throat like a noose. The man who had sent for her stood on the depot steps with his new wife beside him, laughing as the station master called her one day late and worth less than the fare she owed. Then a cowboy with frost-white fingers, under torn gloves, stepped out of the snowmelt and dust. His left hand shook from old winter damage, but his voice did not. "She is not late," he said, looking at the whole town before he looked at her. "She is right on time." Clara could not tell if he meant rescue or ruin. "Before we open the door to this dusty town, tell me your country in the comments. Subscribe if you love Western romances about public shame, unexpected rescue, and hearts that finally come home." The stagecoach wheels groaned to a stop in front of Mercy Crossing's depot, as though even the iron rims were tired of carrying trouble. Dust lifted around the horses' legs and hung there in the cold spring air, turning the sunlight the color of old flour. Clara Whitlow held the doorframe with both hands before she climbed down, because her knees had gone weak some time after the last creek crossing, and pride alone had carried her the final miles. She had imagined this arrival 100 times. In those imaginings she stepped down clean and quiet. Her blue traveling dress was brushed, her hair was pinned. The ribbon at her throat sat neat and hopeful. A man named Reuben Finch, widower and owner of a respectable dry goods counter, would take off his hat and say, "Miss Whitlow, I'm glad you came." My baby, he would not love her. She had not expected love, but he would be decent, and she would be useful, and no one would ask too many questions about why a girl raised around stagecoach barns and ticket ledgers had come west with only one trunk and 3 folded letters. But the wheel had broken in Rattlesnake Wash. Then rain had turned the road to black paste. Then a wheel horse went lame. Then the driver blamed Clara for the delay because blaming a tired woman cost nothing. Now she stood one day late in Mercy Crossing with dried mud on the hem of her dress, her left shoe split from sole to toe, and a red mark on her cheek where the driver had struck her after she told him she had no more money for the extra lodging. The depot porch was crowded. Men leaned on posts. Women shaded their eyes with gloved hands. A boy stopped rolling a hoop in the street and stared. Somewhere behind the depot, a church bell rang once, not for worship, but because the wind moved the rope. The painful detail Clara would remember for the rest of her life was not the slap. It was her bridal ribbon. It had been white when she tied it that morning. Now it was gray with dust hanging crooked at her throat. A woman on the porch saw it and whispered. Another woman covered her mouth. Reuben Finch stood at the top of the depot steps in a brown suit too tight across his stomach. He had a trimmed beard, sharp eyes, and a hand resting on the back of a young woman beside him. The young woman wore a pale yellow dress and a wedding ring that flashed brighter than kindness. Clara saw the ring first. Then she saw Reuben smile. It was not sorry. It was amused. "Well," he said, loud enough for the porch and half the street to hear, "the stage finally brings what it was supposed to bring yesterday." A few men laughed. Clara kept one hand on her small traveling bag. Mr. Finch, Mrs. Finch now has opinions about that name being spoken too familiar. Reuben tipped his head toward the woman in yellow. "This is Lottie. We were married this morning." Clara stared at him. The 3 letters he had sent her were in the pocket sewn inside her dress. One had said he admired a woman who knew hardship. One had said Mercy Crossing needed steady wives more than pretty dolls. The last had said, "Come by the 23rd, and I will meet you at the station. We can be married before supper if you are willing." "I was delayed," Clara said. Her voice came out smaller than she meant. "The road washed out. The driver can tell you." The driver, a thick-necked man named Pruitt, climbed down from the box and spat in the dust. "I can tell plenty." Girl had bad luck stuck to her like burrs. Lost us a whole day. I did not lose you a day. You didn't pay for it either. A murmur passed through the porch. Reuben's smile thinned. Miss Whitlow, a man cannot be expected to wait forever. One day is not forever. Lottie Finch looked Clara up and down. Her eyes stopped on the broken shoe. It is when a woman arrives already owing money. Clara felt heat rise under the handprint on her cheek. I owe no honest debt. Prish slapped a folded paper against the depot post. Fare adjustment, lodging, feed charges, repair delay comes to $11.60. That is a lie. That is stage business, Brute said. Reuben sighed as if Clara had disappointed him by breathing. Mercy Crossing is a decent town. We cannot have every stray female claiming promises and refusing debts. I have your letters. Letters? Lottie said sweetly. From my husband. Reuben's eyes sharpened. Clara saw then that he had not expected her to keep them. Or perhaps he had counted on shame, making her too weak to bring them out. She reached toward the pocket inside her dress, but Prish stepped closer. Careful, girl. A public scene can turn uglier. A tall man near the hitching rail called out. Read the letters if she has them. No need, Reuben snapped. The crowd shifted. Curiosity had teeth. Clara knew that sound from station platforms and hotel kitchens. Folks could smell disgrace before they knew its name, and once they had it in their hands, they passed it around to warm themselves. From across the street, the dry goods store door opened. A thin man with silver hair and a spotless apron stepped out. Jasper Toll, the storekeeper, though Clara did not yet know his name, came forward with a slow smile. What's this? He asked. A bride past her date. She says she has letters, said a woman. Jasper clicked his tongue. Letters can be copied. Promises can be misunderstood. But a debt paper is a debt paper. Prute grinned. That is right. Jasper looked at Clara as though pricing cloth. $11.60. If she cannot pay, town custom allows personal effects to be held until settlement. My trunk, Clara asked. And labor, if required, Jasper said. Kitchen work, laundry, sweeping, whatever place will take you. The word labor sank like a stone in Clara's stomach. She had worked all her life. She was not afraid of labor, but she knew the difference between wages and being passed from hand to hand under a debt written by a liar. My trunk holds my mother's Bible, she said. Jasper smiled wider. Then, you should have guarded your money better. The depot went quiet enough for Clara to hear a horse blowing steam near the trough. Then footsteps crossed the street, slow, uneven, heavy. A cowboy came out of the glare with his hat low and a sheepskin coat hanging open. He was broad in the shoulders, lean in the face, and weather had carved him before age got the chance. His right cheek held a pale scar that ran from his temple down near his jaw. His gloves were old, the left one torn across the knuckles. When he pulled it off, Clara saw fingers bent slightly wrong, the tips pale and stiff as candle wax. Frostbite, old and cruel. The cowboy stopped beside Clara, not touching her, not looking at her first. He looked at Reuben Finch. What did you say her name was? Reuben frowned. This is no ranch matter, Eli. The cowboy turned his head just enough. I asked her name. Clara answered before anyone else could. Clara Whitlow. His eyes came to her then. Gray eyes, cold at first glance but not empty, tired, guarded. A man who had learned to close doors inside himself. Miss Whitlow, he said. Did you come here to marry Finch? Clara swallowed. I came because he asked me to. And the stage was late? Yes. He looked back at Reuben. Then she came when the road allowed. Reuben laughs. That is generous thinking from a man who never waits on anybody. Something moved across Eli's face. Not anger, exactly. A tightening, like a gate chain pulled hard. Prute waved the debt paper. She owes the stage. Eli took the paper with his damaged hand. The fingers did not close well. The paper fluttered once before he pinned it between thumb and palm. He read it. Then he looked at Pruitt. You charging her for a wheel you should have maintained. Pruitt's grin faded. You calling me a cheat? I am asking if you want the sheriff to read your axle log. A few men on the porch chuckled under their breath. Pruitt's jaw shifted. Jesper Tull stepped in smoothly. Eli, a debt remains. Sentiment cannot run a town. No, Eli said. Men without sentiment have been doing it for years. The storekeeper's smile froze. Eli reached into his coat and pulled out a small leather purse. He counted coins slowly, stiff fingers struggling with each one. The silence made every clink sound too loud. Clara felt humiliation roll through her again. No, please, I did not ask you. I know. That was all he said. He put $11.60 into Pruitt's hand. Then he took Clara's trunk off the back of the stage himself. It was not large, but his left hand failed him on the handle. The trunk slipped and hit the ground with a crack. Pruitt smirked. Need help, Russ? Eli's face went hard enough to frighten the smile off the driver. He lifted the trunk again with his right hand and set it beside Clara's feet. Reuben folded his arms. And what is this, Eli? Charity? You collecting broken brides now? Eli looked at the whole porch then. His voice was not loud, but it carried like iron dragged over stone. She is not late, he said. She is right on time. Clara did not understand. Neither did the town. Eli bent, picked up her traveling bag, and nodded toward the street. I need a housekeeper at the North Ranch. Wages are $6 a month, room and board, until you decide where else to go. That should have sounded like rescue. It did not quite, because he said it the way a man might speak of hiring a fence post. Useful, replaceable, without warmth. Lottie whispered something to Reuben and laughed. Clara lifted her chin, though her whole body trembled. I will not be bought. Eli stopped. For the first time, regret flickered in him, quick as a match. I did not buy you, he said. I paid a liar to let go. Then he turned and walked toward a black horse tied near the trough. Clara stood between the depot and the whole town's watching eyes. Behind her were Reuben Finch's letters, suddenly filthy in her pocket. Before her was a stranger with a frost-damaged hand and a voice too cold to be kind. The wind lifted dust around her broken shoe. She picked up the trunk handle. It was too heavy. Eli came back without a word, took the trunk, and this time did not let it fall. Eli Rusk's wagon was not made for comfort. It had feed sacks in the back, a coil of rope, a cracked lantern, 2 sacks of flour, and a box of nails that rattled with every rut. Clara sat on the edge of the wagon bed because he had not offered the bench. My bay, he had forgotten. My bay. He did not care. My bay, he had done enough in front of town, and did not wish to appear softer than that. The road north of Mercy Crossing ran past the church, the blacksmith shop, and a line of cottonwoods still bare from winter. Children stopped playing when the wagon passed. A woman holding a basket leaned toward another and whispered. By sundown, Clara knew the town would have given her 3 different sins and a past worse than anything she had lived. Eli drove with his right hand. His left rested against his thigh, curled and stiff. Now and then he flexed the fingers as if pain had crawled into them and needed reminding who owned the body. Clara held her traveling bag against her lap. You should not have said that. What? That I was right on time. You were. For what? To be pitied. His jaw moved. For work. The word struck harder than she expected. Work was not shame. Work had fed her. Work had kept her alive when her father drank through winter wages and her mother coughed blood into handkerchiefs. But after what had happened at the depot, the word sounded like a door closing on every softer hope she had hidden from herself. I can cook, she said. I can clean rooms, mend harness cloth, keep accounts, tend chickens, read freight tickets, and calm a passenger who thinks every bandit story is waiting behind a rock. Eli glanced at her. That is a lot for one girl. I am 23. That is still young. Not when you have been useful since 10. He looked back at the road. The wagon rolled on. After a while, he said, there is a child at my ranch. My niece Annie, 7 years old. She lost her mother. Clara softened despite herself. I am sorry. She does not need a new one. The words were sharp enough to cut the air. Clara turned toward him. I did not say she did. No. But folks will. I have been in your town 1 hour and already folks have called me bride, stray, liar, debt, and labor. I will not add mother unless a child asks for something I can give. His eyes flicked to her again. For a moment something like respect appeared. Then it disappeared behind the same cold fence. My sister died 2 winters ago, he said. Annie's father rode off before the burial dirt settled. I keep her fed. She goes to school when the weather allows. Mrs. Bell from the church checks on her Sundays. And you need a housekeeper. I need someone to keep meals regular and floors clean. I am gone with cattle often. You could have hired someone before today. I tried. Why did they leave? He did not answer right away. The wagon passed a low ridge where prairie grass bent under the wind. In the distance, mountains still held snow in their cuts and shadows. A hawk circled over a dead cottonwood. At last Eli said, the house is cold. Clara almost laughed, though nothing was funny. Most houses are until someone lights a stove. I mean colder than that. She understood then, not all of it, but enough. His house held grief. My big grief sat at the table. My big grief slept in the corners. My bed watched the child from behind doors. No one opened. I do not frighten easy, Clara said. That is not always wisdom. No. Sometimes it is just practice. They rode another mile in silence. The Rust Ranch appeared near the foot of a long rise fenced with weather-gray rails. The house had once been white, but wind had scraped it down to bare boards in places. A barn leaned slightly east. Smoke rose thin from the kitchen chimney. A red cow watched them pass, as if already judging Clara's worth. A little girl stood on the porch in a brown dress with a shawl wrapped around her shoulders. Her hair was dark and uneven. As though cut by impatient hands, she did not wave. Eli stopped the wagon. Annie, this is Miss Whitlow. She will help with the house. The child looked at Clara's split shoe, then her dusty ribbon, then the red mark still fading on her cheek. Are you the late bride? Annie asked. Clara's throat tightened. Eli spoke too fast. Mind your manners. It is all right. Clara climbed down carefully. Yes, I suppose that is what they will call me. Were you late on purpose? No. Then. That is a foolish name. Clara blinked. The child turned and went inside. Eli rubbed the bridge of his nose with his good hand. She says what she thinks. That might save her trouble later. It might cause it. He carried Clara's trunk into a small room off the kitchen. It held a narrow bed, a washstand, and a window facing the barn. The quilt was folded tight enough to look unused. The air smelled of cold ashes and cedar. Eli set the trunk down. You can sleep here. Kitchen is through there. Annie eats at 6. I take coffee before dawn. Sundays we go to church when work allows. Do not go into the upstairs west room. Clara looked at him. Why? Because I said so. There it was. The hard habit. Not cruelty exactly, but command. A man used to pain obeying him because people would not. Clara straightened. Mr. Russ, I will respect your house, but I have had enough men today give orders without reasons. If the room is private, say it is private. If it is dangerous, say it is dangerous. If it is haunted, I will bring a broom and see what remains. His face tightened. The room is private, he said. Then I will not enter it. He looked as though he wanted to be angry, and could not find a clean place to put it. Fine. He left her there. That first evening, Clara found the kitchen in worse shape than she expected. Not dirty from laziness, dirty from absence. Flour had spilled behind a bin and hardened. The stove door hung loose on one hinge. Coffee grounds had been dumped in a cracked bowl. A child's slate sat on the table beside a heel of bread, gone stiff. Annie watched from the doorway. Uncle Eli burns beans, she said. I have met men with worse sins. He does not sing. Does he know any songs? I don't know. He used to whistle, and I said so. Clara tied an apron over her dress. Would you like stew? We had stew yesterday. What was in it? Beans. Then it was not stew. It was beans hoping for a better life. Annie stared at her. Then very slowly the child smiled. It was small. It vanished quickly, but Clara saw it. She made supper from potatoes, onion, salt pork, and the last decent carrot in a box near the pantry. She mended the stove hinge with a bent nail and a prayer. She set the table for 3 without asking if that was allowed. When Eli came in from the barn, he stopped at the sight. Annie was already seated, hands folded, watching the pot as if Clara had conjured a miracle. Eli removed his hat. You did not have to set a place for me. You live here, don't you? His mouth tightened. Most nights I eat outside. That is a strange habit for a man with a kitchen, Annie whispered. He eats in the barn when he is sad. Eli looked at the child sharply. Clara stirred the stew and pretended not to hear. But she had heard, and so had the house. They ate in a silence that did not feel peaceful. Eli kept his eyes on his bowl. Annie stole glances at Clara. Clara tasted every spoonful before swallowing, because she was too tired to trust her own cooking. After supper, Eli placed $6 on the table. First month, he said. Clara stared. I have not earned it. You will. I do not take wages before work. You need shoes. I need many things. That does not make them yours to decide. His eyes cooled. Pride is expensive. S.O. is being mistaken for property. The room went still. Annie looked between them. Eli picked up the coins. For one terrible second, Clara thought he would pocket them and tell her to leave. Instead, he set them near the flour jar. House money, then, he said. Use what is needed. It was not apology. It was not tenderness. But it was a step backward from insult, and Clara was tired enough to accept that as mercy. That night, she untied the gray bridal ribbon from her throat. She meant to throw it into the stove. Instead, she folded it and placed it inside her mother's Bible. Not because it was precious, because one day she wanted to remember that shame had not killed her. Ranch life did not heal Clara all at once. Healing was not a hymn sung on Sunday and finished by supper. It was more like hauling water from a reluctant well. One bucket, then another. Some days the rope burned the palms. Some days the bucket came up half empty. But if a person kept drawing, there was enough to wash a face, boil coffee, and keep something alive. Clara learned the Rust Ranch by sound before she learned it by sight. The barn door groaned before dawn. Eli's boots crossed the porch at 5:15. Annie dragged 1 foot when she was sleepy, and 2 when she was cross. The kitchen window rattled when the north wind came down from the mountains. The red cow bawled whenever she believed, wrongly, that no one in the world had ever been fed but her. Clara rose early. She baked biscuits. She scrubbed the table until all knife marks showed. She washed curtains that seemed to hold 2 years of dust and sorrow. She mended Annie's dresses and found a blue scrap from one of her own petticoats to patch the elbows. The first time Annie saw the patches, she touched them with wonder. They look like sky. Then do not put your elbows in mud, Clara said. I might forget. Most people do, Eli noticed too. He stood in the doorway that evening, looking at the blue patches while Annie read from a primer by lamplight. Where did you get the cloth, he asked. My bag. You cut up your own things. They were already poor company. He did not know what to do with that answer. Clara learned that Eli was not mean, but he was often ungentle. He spoke in short commands. He corrected Annie's sums with more firmness than patience. He thanked Clara as if gratitude had to be rationed. When a fence hand dropped a gate chain, Eli snapped at him hard enough to make the young man flush. Later, Clara saw Eli in the barn, silently redoing the work himself with his damaged hand clenched against pain. You could have asked him to try again, Clara said from the doorway. Eli did not turn. He should have done it right. People learn slower when shame is doing the teaching. That made him look at her. You have a lesson for every chore. No, some chores have lessons for every person. He stared and gave a humorless breath. You sound like a school teacher. I sound like someone who has been yelled at while learning. He went back to the chain, but his voice was lower when he said, Gate, left loose, can kill cattle. Then teach him, like cattle matter more than your temper. His shoulders stilled. Clara expected him to tell her she had overstepped. Instead, he said, You are bold for a woman with nowhere else to go. Her chest tightened, but she refused to lower her eyes. That is when boldness is cheapest. I have little left to lose. Alice's expression changed then. Not soft, not yet, but less certain of itself. The next morning, Clara heard him call the fence hand back. His voice was still rough, but he showed the boy how to loop the chain twice and wedge the pin. No apology, but no cutting words either. Small kindness, Clara learned, sometimes wore work gloves and pretended to be nothing. In town, the rumor grew legs. At church the first Sunday, Clara walked in with Annie beside her and Eli behind them. The room smelled of pine boards, wool coats, and lamp oil. Conversations thinned as they entered. Mrs. Finch sat near the front in yellow gloves. Reuben did not look back, but his ears reddened. Jasper Tull, the storekeeper, stood by the stove greeting people with the smooth kindness of a man who enjoyed choosing when to be cruel. He smiled at Clara. Miss Whitlow, he said, I trust the Rusk place has found a use for you. Before Clara could answer, Annie said, She makes biscuits that do not bend. A man nearby coughed to hide a laugh. Jasper's eyes flickered. Useful indeed. Clara took Annie's hand and moved to a pew. Eli sat at the aisle, broad shoulders, blocking half the view of them from the room. Clara did not know whether to feel protected or hidden. The sermon was on mercy, which made several people look uncomfortable. Clara kept her eyes on the window, where prairie light trembled through wavy glass. After church, Reuben approached while Eli was speaking with the blacksmith. Clara, he said softly. She turned. Mr. Finch. His smile was regretful now that no crowd had gathered yet. I hope you understand. A man in my position has responsibilities. So does a man with a pen. He glanced around. Those letters were written in earnest at the time. Circumstances changed. You married a girl from town because I came one day late. I married a girl without scandal attached. The words landed clean and cruel. Clara felt herself go cold. Reuben leaned closer. You should burn those letters. They will only embarrass you further. No, Clara said. No, my mother taught me never to burn proof when liars are cold. His face darkened. Careful, Mercy Crossing likes peace. Then it should stop feeding on shame. He stepped back just as Eli returned. Finch, Eli said. Russ. The two men looked at each other with a dislike that had history in it. Clara saw that history and wondered. On the wagon ride home, she asked, Why does Reuben dislike you? Eli's mouth hardened. He dislikes anyone who remembers him smaller. Were you boys together? Most men in small towns were boys together. That does not make them friends. Did he wrong you? Eli kept his eyes on the road. He was courting my sister before Annie's father came through. Clara looked down at her hands. My, yes, and he decided a store account mattered more than a poor ranch girl. The wind moved through dry grass. Clara thought of Myra's, whoever she had been, and the upstairs west room Eli had told her not to enter. I am sorry, she said. Do not be. My was spared him, but his voice held no peace. At the ranch, days grew warmer. Mud dried in wagon ruts. Train whistle could be heard in the distance when the wind came right, long and lonely across the flats. Clara took Annie to school twice a week in the wagon. At first children whispered. Then one girl asked if it was true. Clara had come all the way from Kansas to marry a man who had changed brides like hats. Annie punched her. Clara had to sit in the schoolhouse while the teacher lectured both of them. On the ride home, Annie stared at her boots. Are you mad? Yes, the child's mouth trembled. Clara continued, I am mad you struck with your tum-tuck. You could break it that way. Annie looked up, startled. But she said a mean thing. She did. I wanted her to stop. I know. Didn't I do wrong? Clara pulled the wagon to a halt beside a cottonwood. You did a wrong thing for a loyal reason. That means we fix the thing and keep the reason. Annie thought about that. How? You apologize for hitting. You do not apologize for loving me. The child's eyes filled suddenly. She turned her face away. I don't love you. Clara picked up the reins. Of course not. A moment later, Annie leaned against her side. That night, Eli found Clara washing dishes after Annie had gone to bed. The teacher told me what happened. I will mend the matter tomorrow. Annie should not fight your battles, so what? But a child defending someone is not the ugliest thing that happened in that schoolhouse. Eli stood by the stove, hat in hand. She has not leaned on anyone since my died. Clara kept scrubbing a plate. Children lean when they think something will hold. You planning to hold? The question was too sudden, too bare. Clara set the plate down. For as long as I am here, his jaw tightened. That is not an answer. It is the only honest one. He nodded once, but his face closed. Later, Clara found a pair of new shoes outside her door. Plain brown leather, sturdy soles. No. She carried them to the kitchen where Eli sat repairing a bridle strap by lamplight. You bought these. House money did. No. House money has been buying flour, lamp oil, and coffee. These came from you. He pulled the needle through leather. Your old shoes split. You could have said they were wages. You said you don't take wages before work. A faint warmth moved through her. Unwelcome and tender. Thank you, she said. He did not look up. They might not fit. They fit already. His hand paused. For one breath, the house did not feel cold. Trouble returned to Mercy Crossing on a Thursday train with black smoke behind it, and a man in a pearl gray coat stepping down, as if the platform had been built for his boots. Clara saw him from the wagon before he saw her. Silas Vane. Her former suitor was handsome in the way a knife could be handsome if it caught sunlight. Smooth, dark hair, clean gloves, a smile practiced enough to pass for warmth at a distance. He had once worked as an agent for the stage company in Abilene, and he had once told Clara that a girl with no family strong enough to protect her should be grateful for any man willing to put his name over hers. She had refused him after he struck a stable boy for dropping a valise. A week later, money went missing from the stage office. A week after that, Clara was told she could leave quietly or face charges. She had left with Reuben Finch letters folded like a foolish map toward a new life. Now Silas Vane stood in Mercy Crossing speaking to Jasper Tall outside the dry goods store. Clara's hands tightened around the reins. Annie, sitting beside her, noticed. Do you know him? No. It was the first lie Clara had told the child, and it tasted bitter immediately. Silas turned then. His eyes found Clara. His smile did not change, but something in it sharpened. He touched the brim of his hat. Clara drove on. That evening, she burned the biscuits. Annie stared at them. They are black. They are. Are we eating them? We are calling them a lesson. In what? Attention. Eli came in and knew at once. His eyes moved from the burned pan to Clara's face. What happened? Nothing. Annie sighed. Grown people say nothing when the something is too big. Clara pressed her fingers to her forehead. Eli sent Annie to wash up. When the child was gone, he said, "Who came on the train?" Clara looked at him sharply. "There are only 3 things that make a kitchen go wrong," he said. "Sickness, grief, or a man." She almost smiled. Then she could not. "Silas Vane," she said. "He worked for the stage company." Eli waited. Clara had carried the story alone so long that speaking it felt like lifting a lid off something spoiled. "He wanted to marry me. I refused. Money disappeared from the office where I worked. He said he could make the accusation vanish if I changed my mind." Eli's face darkened. "I left. I had no proof, only fear." "Did you take the money?" "No, I did not ask because I wondered." "Then why ask?" So you could hear yourself answer. That undid her more than sympathy would have. She gripped the edge of the table. "He will say I stole. He will say Reuben was right to reject me. He will say anything that makes me small enough to carry off. No one is carrying you off." The words were firm, but Clara heard the danger in them. Men like Eli believed protection was a wall built by force. Men like Silas knew how to use law, rumor, paper, and polished voices. "You cannot shoot a rumor," Clara said. "No, but you can starve it. Mercy Crossing has a large appetite." Eli looked toward the dark window. "Then we feed it truth," but truth came dear. The next day, Jasper Tull refused Clara credit for sugar, though the Rusk Ranch account had always stood good. He did it with 3 women watching. "New policy," he said. "No account purchases under the hand of temporary help." Clara kept her voice even. "Then send the bill to Mr. Rusk. I prefer not to involve Eli in matters beneath him." The insult was carefully placed. Clara heard the women hear it. She put the sugar back. Outside, Cy leaned against a post. "Clara Bell Whitlow," she kept walking. He fell into step beside her. "You look thinner. You look the same." "That sounds unkind." "It was meant to." He chuckled, still proud. Even after arriving late to another man's promise, she stopped. "You followed me?" "I came on company business. Imagine my surprise finding you here, dressed as a ranch servant and living under the roof of a damaged cowboy." Her hand curled. Silas leaned closer. "Does he know what you are?" "Yes," Clara said. "A woman who walked away from you." His smile vanished for half a second. "Be careful. The stage company still has questions about missing funds. The stage company can ask them in court. With what money will you defend yourself?" The street seemed to narrow around her. Silas softened his voice. "Come with me quietly, and I will see that no charge is pressed. I am willing to forgive much. Then forgive yourself and leave me out of it." She stepped around him. He caught her wrist. It was not hard enough to bruise, but it was enough to bring back every locked room she had escaped in her mind. Before she could pull free, Elias' voice came from behind them. "Take your hand off her." Silas released Clara and turned with a pleasant expression. "Mr. Rusk, I presume?" Eli stood near the hitching rail. His left hand hung stiff at his side. His right was empty, but no one looking at him would mistake him for Anan. "Vane," Eli said. "You are standing too close." Silas lifted both hands. A private conversation. Not when she is trying to leave." A few townspeople slowed. Silas knew an audience when he saw one. "I have no wish for unpleasantness. I am merely concerned." Miss Whitlow left Abilene under a cloud. Clara felt the old shame rise like floodwater. Eli looked at her, not with doubt, with warning, perhaps, or asking. She stood straighter. Then speak plainly, she said to Silas. Clouds are for weather. Accusations are for men brave enough to sign them. A murmur passed along the street. Silas' eyes chilled. Very well. Money was stolen from the Abilene stage office. You had access. As so did you? I was trusted. You were believed. That is not the same. Jasper Tull came out of his store. This sounds serious. Eli did not take his eyes off Silas. It sounds unfinished. Silas smiled again. It will be finished soon. He walked away. Clara's legs trembled, but she kept standing until the watching eyes moved on. Eli came close enough to speak low. You should have told me he touched you. He touched me 10 seconds before you arrived. You should have called out. I have called out before and been told I invited the hand. The anger in Ella's face changed. It lost its direction and turned inward. On the ride home, neither spoke for a long time. At the ranch, Annie ran to meet them, waving a paper from school. I got all my sums right. Claire smiled because the child deserved that much. Everyone, even the hard ones. Eli lifted her down from the porch rail where she had climbed too high. Good work. Annie beamed as if he had given her a pony. After supper, Clara went upstairs with folded sheets. She passed the west room and heard a sound inside. Not a ghost, a loose shutter. It knocked softly in the wind. She hesitated. Eli had said the room was private, but rain was coming, and the sound of wood striking wood would keep Annie awake. Clara stood there for a full minute, torn between obedience and usefulness. Then she opened the door. The room smelled of lavender gone dry. A woman's blue dress hung on the wall peg. A small cradle sat near the window, empty. On the dresser lay a child's knitted cap, no bigger than Clara's palm. Dust covered everything except a framed photograph turned face down. Clara's breath caught. This was not Mai's room. It was a room for a wife. Eli appeared in the doorway behind her. His face went white with fury. I told you not to come in here. The shutter. I told you. I am sorry. The apology did not reach him. He crossed the room, slammed the shutter latch, and stood with his back to her. Get out, Clara did. But at the door she turned. I did not know. He laughed once harshly. No. You just decided knowing did not matter. That is not fair. He faced her then, and the pain in him was so raw she almost stepped back. Fair. My wife begged me to fetch the doctor in a January storm. I waited because I thought morning would be safer. By dawn, the baby was stillborn, and Ruth was bleeding too hard to save. I rode then, froze half my hand getting there, came back with the doctor to a quiet house. Clara could not speak. Eli's voice dropped. I keep that room closed because some doors should have stayed open when it mattered. Now I choose which ones stay shut. He walked past her and down the stairs. Clara stood in the hall with the folded sheets in her arms and tears burning her eyes. That night the house was cold again, colder than before. The town auction was held on Saturday beneath a sky the color of tin. Mercy Crossing gathered beside Jasper Tull's store where wagons formed a half circle and men smoked near the hitching rail. A town auction could be cheerful when it was quilts, tools, jars of peaches, or a milk cow no one needed but everyone admired. This one had a sharper smell. Silas Vane stood beside Sheriff Dawes with a leather folder under his arm. Jasper had set a table on the porch. Reuben Finch hovered near the steps, pretending not to enjoy himself. Lottie Finch stood with the women, watching Clara as if shame might stain her gloves if she came too close. Clara had not wanted to come. Eli had not asked her to. In fact, he had told her to stay at the ranch. You think hiding will protect me? She had asked. I think walking into a wolf pen is foolish. I have been in the pen since the day I arrived. I can handle Vane. No, Clara said. You can fight him. That is not the same. His eyes had hardened. You want to stand in public and let them tear you open. I want Annie to know a woman can be accused and still stand. That stopped him. Because Annie was in the doorway, listening. Now Clara stood near the auction table wearing her plain brown shoes, her mended blue dress, and no bridal ribbon. She had placed Reuben's letters inside her mother's Bible and carried both in a cloth bag. Eli stood 10 feet away, not beside her. That hurt more than she expected. Since the night of the West Room, he had been polite and distant. He spoke to her about meals, Annie, fence hands, and weather. Nothing else. No apology came from him, and she had stopped asking with her eyes. Annie stood with Mrs. Bell from church, clutching the older woman's hand. The child's face was pale but fierce. Sheriff Dawes cleared his throat. Mr. Vane has requested public notice regarding a claim from the Abilene stage office. He says Miss Clara Whitlow is wanted for questioning concerning missing funds. Silas stepped forward. I have no desire to humiliate a lady. Someone in the crowd snorted softly. Silas continued, but since she has hidden herself under Mr. Rusk's protection, I must act through proper channels. Clara spoke. I have hidden nowhere. Silas inclined his head. Then, you will not object to coming with me. She objects, and he shouted. A ripple moved through the crowd. Sheriff Dawes looked uncomfortable. Now, child. Clara touched Annie's shoulder as the girl rushed to her. It is all right. No, it ain't, Annie said, crying now. They keep calling you things, and you keep standing like it don't hurt. Clara knelt in the dust, heedless of every eye. It hurt, but hurt is not a command. I do not have to obey it. Annie threw her arms around Clara's neck. That was when Eli moved. He came to them slowly, as if crossing those 10 feet required more courage than facing a gun. He stopped beside Clara and put his damaged left hand, stiff and pale, on Annie's back. Then he looked at the crowd. She is under my protection, he said. Silas smiled. Protection is not innocence, no, but it is a beginning. Jasper Tall tapped the table. There are debts involved as well. The stage charge, Mr. Rusk paid my settle local inconvenience, but if Miss Whitlow owes Abilene funds, perhaps her belongings should be held pending resolution. My mother's Bible is not for auction, Clara said. Jasper lifted his brows. No one said auction. You set a table for papers, Jasper said smoothly. Eli turned to the sheriff. You have a warrant, Sheriff Dawes shifted. Not a warrant. A request? A request can be refused. Silas opened the leather folder. I have statements signed by whom? Company personnel. Clara stepped forward. Read the names. Silas's jaw tightened. Read them, Eli said. Silas handed a paper to the sheriff. Dawes squinted. Statement from Silas Vane, acting agent. Statement from Mr. Hobb, clerk. Clara's heart jumped. Mr. Hobb was dismissed for drunkenness before the money disappeared, Silas said. He was present enough. Clara opened her cloth bag and took out the Bible. Her hands trembled, but she made them work. From between the pages, she drew not Reuben's letters first, but a small stage receipt she had almost forgotten. Her mother had taught her to keep papers, every paper, even ones that seemed useless. This is a receipt from the Abilene office, she said, signed by Mr. Hobb on the day Silas says I stole. It shows the strongbox was transferred to Silas Vane at 4 in the afternoon for deposit. Silas went still. The sheriff took it. Jasper's smile faded. Clara's voice grew stronger. I left the office at noon that day because Silas dismissed me after I refused his proposal. If money vanished after 4, then the last signed hand was his. That receipt proves nothing, Silas snapped. It proves you lied about access. The crowd stirred. Eli looked at Clara. For the first time since the West Room, his face was open. Not healed, not easy, but present. Reuben Finch tried to step back, but Clara saw him. And while we are reading papers, she said, pulling out 3 letters. Let Mercy Crossing hear what kind of promise makes a woman travel 600 miles And what kind of man calls her scandal when a washed-out road delays her by one day? Reuben barked. Those are private. Lottie's face went white. Clara looked at Eli. She did not know why. Perhaps because courage sometimes needed one steady witness. Eli nodded once, so Clara read. She did not read every word. Only enough. Reuben's invitation. His promise. His urgency. His line about wanting a woman who knew hardship because such a woman would be grateful. By the time she finished, no one laughed. Lottie stepped away from her husband as if seeing mud on his boots for the first time. Reuben's mouth opened and closed. Jasper Tull tried to recover the room. Even so, this does not make her respectable. That was the moment Eli Rusk made his public choice. Not with a gun, not with a kiss, not with a grand speech polished by vanity. He took off his hat. A cowboy removing his hat in the street made men quiet. It meant prayer, burial, or truth. I spent 2 years making my house a punishment, he said. For myself, mostly. Sometimes for my niece. Sometimes for anyone who stepped inside and reminded me life had not stopped with Ruth. Miss Whitlow came into that house after this town tried to grind her down. She fed a child I was keeping alive, but not comforting. She taught my hands to be less hard. She told the truth when silence would have been safer. If that does not make a person respectable, then this town has been using the word wrong. Clara could not breathe. Eli turned to Jasper. You will restore ranch credit under her hand or lose Russ's business. Jasper's nostrils flared. Your father held that account before you. My father is dead. Your cattle loans pass through men who trust my records. Then let them record this. I stand with Clara Whitlow. Silas laughed coldly. Careful, Russ. A woman like that can cost a man his name. Eli looked at Clara then. The old fear was in him. Fear of loving and losing. Fear of opening a door too late. Fear of being the man who waited until morning. But this time, before the storm passed, he moved. My name has done little but keep me lonely, he said. If it cannot shelter an innocent woman and a child who loves her, it is not worth polishing. Annie began to cry in earnest. Mrs. Bell wiped her eyes. Sheriff Dawes folded the receipt and tucked it into his vest. Mr. Vane, I believe you and I need to telegraph Abilene before anyone travels anywhere. Silas' charm vanished. You have no authority to hold me, no, the sheriff said. But I have authority to ask why a man carrying an accusation also carries no warrant. Silas stepped back. Eli stepped forward. Not threatening, just present. Silas looked from him to the crowd and understood the wind had changed. He mounted his horse behind the hotel and rode out before dusk. The sheriff sent a wire anyway. By Monday, a reply came from Abilene. Silas Vane had been suspected for months. Mr. Hobb had admitted signing what he was told for drink money. The missing funds had traveled through 3 hands, none of them Clara's. Truth arrived by telegraph, short and expensive. But it arrived. Apologies came slowly in Mercy Crossing. Some came dressed as extra flour in Clara's order. Some came as women meeting her eyes instead of turning away. Some came as silence from people who had once laughed loudly. And even that was a kind of surrender. Reuben Finch never apologized in words. Lottie did. She came to the Rusk Ranch 2 weeks after the auction wearing no yellow gloves and carrying a jar of peat preserves. Clara met her on the porch. Lottie looked younger without pride holding her up. I was cruel to you. Yes, Clara said. Lottie swallowed. I wanted to believe his story because the other choice was seeing my husband plain. Clara waited. I am not asking you to comfort me, Lottie said. I only wanted to say I am sorry. Clara looked at the jar. Peaches. My mother's. Annie likes peaches. Lottie's eyes fill. I leave them. Yes. It was not friendship, not yet. But it was a door unlatched. Jasper Toll's apology was worse. He made it in the store with 3 witnesses because he cared less about Clara's dignity than his own survival. "Miss Whitlow," he said stiffly, it appears certain conclusions were premature." Clara set a sack of sugar on the counter. "That is a coward's apology, Mr. Toll." A man near the stove choked on his coffee. Jasper reddened. "You might, if you decide to do it properly." The store went silent. Jasper looked at the account book. He looked at Clara. Then he forced the words through his teeth. "I am sorry I treated you unjustly." Clara nodded. "Put the sugar on the rusk account." He did. On the walk back to the wagon, Clara smiled for the first time that day. Eli saw it. "You enjoyed that?" "I did." Vengeful woman, only with storekeepers. He almost smiled. Almost had become common between them. Almost at breakfast when Annie spilled milk and Clara caught the cup before it fell. Almost in the barn when Eli's damaged hand cramped and Clara silently took the buckle without making him ask. Almost at church when the congregation sang off key and Annie whispered that the Lord must love noise to invite so much of it. But the west room still stood closed, and Eli still had not apologized. Clara did not press. She had learned that grief was a locked room too. A person could be invited near the door, but breaking it open helped no one. Then one evening, rain came hard across the prairie. Not a gentle rain, but a slanting, cold sheet that turned the yard to silver mud. Annie woke from a nightmare crying for her mother. Though Clara did not know if she meant Ruth, or someone only dreams remembered. Clara reached the child's room first. Annie clung to her. "I thought you left." Annie sobbed. "I am here." "People leave." "Yes," Clara whispered. "Some dough, will you?" Clara closed her eyes. That was the question she had avoided, because honesty could hurt a child more cleanly than lies could comfort her. "I do not want to," she said. Annie cried harder. Eli stood in the doorway, his face stricken. Clara rocked the child until the sobs slowed. Then Eli came in and sat on the edge of the bed. Awkwardly, with a tenderness that seemed to pain him, he laid his good hand over Annie's hair. "I have done wrong by you," he said. Annie sniffed. "When?" "A lot of whens." Clara looked at him. Eli kept his eyes on the child. "I thought, if I kept the house quiet, nothing else could be taken from us. But quiet can take things too." Annie rubbed her face. "I like when Clara sings her." "She does not sing," Eli said. "Yes, she does, when she thinks the stove is louder." Clara's cheeks warmed. Eli looked at her then, and the almost smile came fully, weary and real. After Annie slept, Clara went downstairs to bank the stove. Eli followed, carrying the lamp. Rain tapped the windows. The kitchen smelled of warm ashes, peach preserves, and wet wool. He set the lamp on the table. "I owe you an apology." Clara folded the stovecloth slowly. "For which part?" The corner of his mouth moved. "You keep accounts too well." "Yes, for speaking to you like hired trouble. For making help sound like ownership. For the West Room. For being angry that you opened a door when the truth is, I have been angry at myself for keeping one closed." Clara's throat tightened. "I should not have entered." "No," he said. "But I should have told you why." Rain filled the pause. Eli looked toward the stairs. "Ruth was my wife. The baby was our son. I never named him out loud. Could not bear it." Clara did not move. "After they died, I brought Annie here often. She said a child's noise would save me. Then fever took the next winter, and I took Annie in because there was no one else. I fed her, kept her warm, but I did not let her save me." "She loves you," Clara said. "I know. That made it worse. Love often does." He looked at her then. There was no cold fence in his eyes now. Only a man standing in weather, unsure if the door before him would open. "I am afraid of wanting you here," he said. The words were plain, not smooth. Better for it. Clara held the back of a chair. I am afraid of being wanted only when useful. That is not what this is. What is it? He breathed in slowly. His damaged fingers flexed, stiff and pale in lamplight. It's just me, not knowing how to ask a woman to stay without making it sound like work. Clara's eyes filled. Then do not ask tonight, she said, softly. Show me tomorrow, and the next day, and the day after that. He nodded. I can do that. I believe you can. The next morning, Eli opened the west room. He did not make a ceremony of it. He simply came to breakfast with the key in his hand and set it beside Clara's coffee cup. After chores, he said, I want to clean it. Annie went very still. With us? Clara asked. Eli looked at the child. If Annie wants, Annie whispered. Is it a sad room? Eli said. But it does not have to stay only that. They cleaned it together. Dust rose in golden clouds. Clara washed the window. Annie folded the tiny cap and asked if she could keep it in a box, as so he is not forgotten. Eli stood with the photograph of Ruth in his hands for a long time, then set it upright on the dresser. He named the baby Samuel, one word. 6 years late, right on time. Spring opened fully after that. Grass greened along the creek. Calves kicked up their heels in the pasture. Clara planted beans behind the kitchen and taught Annie how to press seeds into dirt without drowning them in hope or water. Eli repaired the porch step he had ignored for 2 years. He began eating at the table every night. Sometimes he even whistled in the barn, low and rusty, as if the habit had been buried but not dead. Mercy Crossing changed in small ways because people do. Not always enough, not always quickly. But sometimes shame loses its place when one person refuses to carry what never belonged to her. The strongest change came at the summer church social. Long tables were set under cottonwoods. Women brought pies, beans, bread, pickles, and cakes. Men pretended not to care who won the horseshoe contest. Children ran with ribbons tied to sticks. The church bell rang in a clean blue afternoon. Clara stood beside the lemonade barrel, pouring cups for children. When Sheriff Dawes approached, Miss Whitlow, he said, removing his hat. A final wire came from Abilene. Silas Vane was arrested in Santa Fe trying the same trick under another company name. Clara closed her eyes. The last chain inside her fell quiet. Thank you for telling me. There is more. The company admits you were wrongfully dismissed. They offer back wages. She let out a breath that was almost a laugh. How generous of them to return what was mine. The sheriff smiled. I told them similar. Eli came up beside her. He had heard enough to understand. Annie, who had been chasing another girl, ran over. Is he gone? The bad man? Clara knelt. Yes, or always? Always. As close to always as the law can make it. Annie threw her arms around her. This time, in front of the whole town, Clara did not stiffen under watching eyes. She held the child and let herself be seen, loving and love. Then, Eli cleared his throat. The sound was small, but Clara felt him gathering courage beside her. Miss Whitlow, he said. She stood. People nearby began to notice. Then more. Mercy Crossing had not lost its appetite for public moments, but this one felt different, gentler. Perhaps because Mrs. Bell folded her hands and smiled before anyone could whisper. Eli held his hat in both hands. His damaged fingers did not bend well around the brim. I told you once that you were right on time, he said. Clara's heart beat hard. First, I meant the ranch needed help. Then I told myself Annie needed you. Both were true, but not all of it. He swallowed. You came 1 day late for a man who did not deserve you. You came 2 years late for a house that had forgotten warmth. You came years after I stopped. believing I could be anything but a man who failed the people he loved. His voice roughened, and somehow, you were still right on time. Clara's eyes blurred. He went down on one knee in the grass. A soft sound moved through the tables. I am not asking for a housekeeper, he said. I am not asking for a mother for Annie, though she already chose you without asking either of us. I am asking if you will let me spend my days proving that wanted and useful are not the same word. Clara Whitlow, will you marry me when your heart says the hour is right? No one breathed. Annie whispered loudly. Say yes if it does. Clara laughed through tears. She looked at Eli Russ, frostbitten cowboy, wounded husband, imperfect guardian, stubborn man who had learned to open doors before morning. She thought of the depot dust, the gray ribbon, the slap, the laughter, the broken shoe. She thought of biscuits, blue patches, Annie's fierce little hand. The west room window washed clean, Samuel's name spoken at last. She stepped close and took Eli's damaged hand between both of hers. My heart, she said, has been afraid of clocks. A few people chuckled softly, though Eli did not take his eyes off her. But today, Clara said, it says I am right on time. Eli bowed his head over her hands. The town applauded, not all at once, but like rain beginning on a roof. Mrs. Bell cried openly. Sheriff Dawes clapped with his hat under one arm. Lottie Finch smiled from the edge of the crowd, and even that felt like one more loose thread tied off. They married 3 Sundays later, not in haste, not from debt, not to silence rumor. They married after banns were read, after Clara used part of her back wages to buy a new dress of soft blue cotton, after Annie insisted on carrying wildflowers and dropped half of them before reaching the aisle. Reuben Finch did not attend. No one missed him. In the church, Eli's voice shook on his vows, but his hands did not. Clara promised not obedience without thought, but faithfulness with truth. Eli promised shelter without ownership, protection without pride, and warmth even on days when grief found the windows. At the ranch that evening, lanterns glowed from the porch. Fence hands played fiddle and harmonica. Mrs. Bell danced once with Sheriff Dawes and declared him lighter on his feet than his paperwork suggested. Annie fell asleep on Clara's lap before the cake was gone. Later, after guests had driven home and the prairie settled under stars, Clara stepped onto the porch. The night smelled of hay, lamp smoke, and cooling earth. Eli came beside her, tired, yes, happy. She leaned against his shoulder, learning how. He was quiet a moment. Does it feel like home? Clara looked through the kitchen window. The stove was banked. Annie slept upstairs. Ruth's photograph stood in the west room, not hidden now. Samuel's little cap rested in a cedar box. Her mother's Bible lay on the parlor shelf, and inside it, the gray bridal ribbon remained folded between the pages. Not as shame, as proof. Yes, Clara said. It feels like a door that stayed open. Eli took her hand carefully, his frost-bitten fingers rough and warm around hers. Far off, a train whistle crossed the prairie. Once that sound had meant leaving, then humiliation, then fear. Tonight it sounded like distance finally giving up its claim. Clara Whitlow Russ stood in the lantern light beside the man who had not rescued her perfectly, but had chosen her publicly, learned her slowly, and loved her without asking her to disappear. She had come one day late to Mercy Crossing, one day late to a false promise, one day late to public shame, but to the child who needed tenderness, to the house that needed laughter, and to the cowboy who needed forgiveness before he could love again, she had arrived exactly when Mercy was ready to open the door.